Hi everyone, a very warm welcome to today's Work From Anywhere series, the launch of the series. We'll be doing this every Thursday for the next couple of months. A lot has changed for me in the last few months. Literally 8 weeks ago we had baby Barra, a baby boy after having 2 girls. And that for me has been probably the most special gift. But I'm also equally proud of kicking off the Work From Anywhere team, which was really a nascent idea 6 months ago. But what it's turned into is a great community of people, like-minded people trying to tackle these Work From Anywhere challenges. I'm very excited about today having the likes of Rowena and Jordan and Hannah giving their different perspectives on the challenges and opportunities of Work From Anywhere. Next week, we're going to be having Chris Debner, top 100 most admired global mobility professionals in the world. We're also going to be having Frank Disson, Global Head of Expat Services at WTS Global. And we're also going to be having Bayashari Pancholi, who is an employment law specialist at RoRemote. What a fantastic group that's going to be. So you'll see the details down below in the chat where you can sign up for the session next week if you like. And for now, I'm just going to leave it over to the wonderful Aurelie. Thanks again for taking part. Looking forward to having an engaging discussion, and I hope you enjoy the series.
And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. We are here ourselves tuning in from 4, even 5 different countries, if we add John to that. So first of all, John, congrats for the newly baby boy. It's really amazing. My name is Aurelie. I have the big pleasure to actually kick off this Work From Anywhere team series of webinars. And I'm joined by 3 of fantastic experts who I'm sure are as passionate as I am about that topic. To kick off, and Rowena, Hannah, Jordan, we'll get to you in a little second. Just to remind our audience what exactly we're going to talk about right now to kick off this series. So remote work, it's a big yes, right? I think 2020 made a point, work is actually not a place or not a place anymore. But what's next? Basically, how do we move from the what to the how? That's exactly what we're going to tackle in this next hour together. It's been now 1 year, into the pandemic. And most of you probably have seen that not a single week passes without an announcement of flexible work arrangements from major companies, but also from new age companies. So it's basically everyone now that's in the game. And nomads have never been happier, because those who have already embraced that lifestyle before the pandemic hit, actually made a point. And then on the other hand, for employees, it has actually made a point. It has proven that remote work can work, and that organizations now probably have to adapt to some more hybrid work, if not even fully virtual work. So I guess it's pretty fair to say that with everything's going on, what we are experiencing right now, it's like an inversion of the work pyramid. What does that mean? What are the next steps? So enough of me talking right now. I would love each of you, Rowena, Hannah, Jordan, to introduce yourself and tell us what you're doing. Why are you passionate about that topic? And most of all, what is your current take on the current state of work? Rowena, let's kick off with you.
Thank you so much. My name is Rowena Hennigan. I'm currently joining you from Gran Canaria. I live in Zaragoza in the north of Spain, but I'm originally from the west of Ireland. Spain is the 14th country I've lived in. I've traveled to almost 70, and I am currently a location independent mother. So my family is location independent, and I've been remote working since 2007, 4 years full-time here in Spain. And the last 14, 16 months early have been unreal. The acceleration, the pace of change. And for someone who 3 years ago dreamt of being able to create an academic course on remote work to teach students the skills needed to be an effective virtual and remote worker, all my dreams came true, but not the way I hoped during the pandemic. So everything has been accelerated. And the one thing I want to focus on today is that particular skills gap and that appreciation of the pace of change. And I think having Hannah and Jordan here as well, it's a wonderful chance to stop and take stock for what's happened in these recent months.
Love that. Perfect. So one country done. Second country, let's move to Hannah.
Hello, everyone. And as my title says, I'm with eResidency of Estonia. I'm the head of content, which means I am coming at you from Tallinn, Estonia. And you may not know this, but it can get hot here. It's today, I think it's like 27 degrees Celsius and sunshine. So Estonia isn't all snow in winter. It is also beautiful in summer with long sunny days. So a bit about me, I'm Australian and British. I've been traveling since I was a couple of weeks old. I think my parents worked in travel, so I was on a plane basically as soon as I was born. And over the years, I've lived in many countries, so I consider myself a bit of a slow mad in that sense.
Nice.
I have a legal background and policy background in media and content in Australia, but I decided to leave that career and come to Europe and find more an international path. And so I've been with eResidency now for 2 years, and it really, even though it is a national program, it is a government program of Estonia, it's truly global, and I get to talk to people from all over the world every day. So these webinars are quite normal for me, which is fantastic. And we have a huge community of people all over the world, business people, remote workers, location independent workers. And so I'm passionate about this, not just from a personal perspective, but also because it really cuts into all the work we do here at eResidency.
And what is your current take on the state of work right now in 2021?
Yeah, so I might have a slightly more unpopular opinion, which is that I think this has actually been happening for a lot longer. I think that COVID has definitely accelerated it. But I think, ever since we had air travel, we had globalization, we had digitization, people have wanted to leave and go across borders and travel and live in different places and experience different cultures. Countries and governments, yes, they've been reacting in the last year really quickly, but some countries have been prepared a little bit earlier, and I like to think that Estonia is one of them. So I'll talk a little bit more about that in the webinar, but that's probably how I look at it from a macro perspective anyway.
Amazing. Moving continent now with Jordan.
Thank you, Aurelie. So my name is Jordan Carroll, and as it says in my little bar there, I'm the remote job coach. So I create content courses and coaching programs to help high performers land legitimate remote jobs. And I've been working over 7 years remotely. I'm from the US originally, from California, but have lived in 15 different countries. And, I've worked remotely for my own businesses. I've worked remotely for a Fortune 50 company. I've worked remotely for multiple startups. And I think that gave me a really unique perspective when it came to, one, the learning curve of working remote and what that takes for someone to be able to do that. And then two, the learning curve for how to search for remote work and find it from different companies and do that without just sending out a bunch of applications, because that doesn't really work. So I try to give remote job seekers a creative and unique way of being able to do that and sit in between kind of a recruiter and a career coach, and also work with a lot of remote companies to help them find talent. So that's been really exciting. And I'm just excited for kind of the more borderless, future. I love having Hannah on this because I think the e-residency, the digital nomad visa topics, and even a lot of the stuff we're going to be talking about today is just so important for opportunity and access for people and people being able to move across these imaginary lines we've drawn on countries, which government is just totally behind technology and outdated. So really, really stoked to see the future of that and how we can become more borderless society. And currently living in Mexico, that's one of my big passions is giving people the freedom to be able to move about.
I love that term, borderless society. I might steal that a couple of times during the webinar.
I stole it from someone else, so you're stealing from them too. I don't know how stealing works with that kind of thing.
It's good inspiration.
Yeah.
And myself actually I operate in a team. We're fully distributed. We never had any office. We're a team of consultants. So we actually work in travel, and I travel while working. It's been now 7 years. And I'm actually in the process right now of settling in Dubai. So I'm adding another continent to the to the panel, and I would say I completely agree with everything that all of you just said, and for me, like it has really been it has risen amazing awareness on the fact that yes, we can work remotely. And what I'm actually super excited to see, like in the coming years, probably it's not right now that it's going to happen, but it's basically where work truly meets travel. That, you know, I work in business travel, and it's even more fascinating to imagine how when you build a business travel program, how you can link it even more to this work from anywhere lifestyle. And just before we dig in, I was keen to share some key facts that I have gathered by doing some research, just to add some context. And before I do that, so welcome for our new joiners, in case you missed the very beginning of this webinar. We would love this to be as interactive as possible. So feel free to leave a comment on whatever platform you are, and we will be happy to display your question, display your comments. We're really keen to make this interactive. So first thing, it's Harvard Business Review. And according to them, one trend that will shape work in 2021 and beyond is that employers will shift from managing the employee experience to managing the life experience of their employees. And I think that's actually super interesting. Second trend, it's this time a McKinsey & Company report. It's the future of work after COVID-19. And it's exactly what you pointed, Rowena. The pandemic accelerated existing trends in remote work, e-commerce and automation, with up to 25% more workers than previously estimated, potentially needing to switch occupations, which will actually create opportunities. And this is where it closes the loop as well with Jordan, what you're doing as well, helping people out there. Microsoft has just released 2021 Work Trend Index, and there's something that to me was absolutely brilliant and fascinating to hear. The study involved more than 30,000 people in 31 countries, so it's pretty big. And thank you, Jen. Absolutely. Sorry, I'm reading the comments at the same time, and yeah, there's a lot of overlap coming with business travel and work from anywhere. Feel free to drop your comments. So in this Microsoft research, they found out that with over 40% of the global workforce that is considering leaving their employer this year, it clearly makes the point that a thoughtful approach to hybrid work will be critical for attracting and retaining diverse talent. And this leads me straight to you, Rowena. What I would love to understand is how has remote work clearly evolved the past years? Because you've mentioned it has accelerated, but what trends do we see, and what exactly do we call remote?
Super question to start off with, because there's so much jargon in our world.
Yeah, right.
Distributed work from anywhere, mobility, home working, which, by the way, home working makes me cringe a little bit. And I am in my apartment today, but remote work for me and for all of us joining from different locations, it's much more work from anywhere. Work is not a place. If you happen to choose to work from home one day, another day a co-working, another day a library, it's all about that flexibility, Aurelie. So it's really a good point to stop and look at the acceleration, look at the jargon, but also realize maybe, especially if you're being honest with yourself, if you're sitting there and you've only been home working during the pandemic, please be open-minded about your experience, because as Matt Mullenweg said, remote work only or remote home working only during the pandemic was the remote work experiment none of us asked for in the remote work community. It is totally stressful, and I went through it, to be stuck at home with a small child trying to homework and being completely restricted in your movements. So I'd like to start by saying that it has been accelerated, but I want to also go down to the micro level and empathize with people who haven't experienced it ideally. And a lot of the research has shown, even though people can see the benefits, the flexibility, more time with family, no commute time, there is evidence to show that people are stressed, there's more hours being worked, and of course we're all fatigued, because everyone knows, as much as it's wonderful to be on a webinar like this, it's tiring to be on video conferencing calls. So I think where I'd like to start is to appreciate what we've all been through is not exactly true remote work. And yeah. I don't want to boast it too much, but even looking at the four of us and John in Ireland, where we're working in different locations, there'll be people tuning in who haven't been outside their apartment walls, Aurelie, during the experiment. So I think it's a really good point to start and say, whatever the trends have been, we need to be cognizant of the real experience people have had over the last 16 months.
That's a very fair point. And I agree that the current situation doesn't do justice to what is really remote work and work from anywhere, because there are so many restrictions, right? And Jordan, and just before we go to Hannah, Jordan, I would just like to pick your brain on that. Is why do people right now want a remote job in the first place? Did you also see that acceleration?
Oh yeah. I mean, my calendar got filled up pretty quick.
Good for you.
So, yeah, no, it was good timing. And I think was said before, it's not the ideal situation to have a boom in your business. I mean, it's always great to have a boom in business, but I looked at it as I'm providing something that's really helping people right now, because like you said, I think it was 25% of people were forced into, migrating to a new industry, migrating to a new role. And it's pretty obvious why people want the flexibility. They've had a taste. And as Rowena says, it's like maybe they haven't had the full taste of freedom, but I think even the people who have worked from home who really haven't done that before realize, oh, wow, this is a lot better than that commute. I'm getting a lot of this time back. I'm able to cook for myself. I mean, it's the little things in your day that make a big deal. Like, really, I mean, and I can't wait for a lot of those people to experience more of that freedom. And that's why I do what I do. So I've seen a huge uptick in that. And then like you'd point out some numbers, there's some other ones that I collected in preparation for this. And there was that survey, and John's alluded to this before, is that people were asked, would you rather take $30,000 raise, or would you rather stay, at home and continue to work from home? And 64% of people said they'd rather stay at home. So it's pretty clear to me. It's on the company side now. I mean, companies have the data. 40% of people are prepared to leave if there's not flexibility. I think we're also going to see a lot of millennials are now going to be in leadership roles. And they've had, much more experience with technology as they've grown up, at younger ages. And then once Gen Z enters the workforce more and more, we're going to just see that default is going to be flexibility. And I think it's not just remote that people are looking for. People are looking for choice. People just want to be able to choose. They want to feel like humans. They don't want to feel like, cattle being pushed through the gates to the office, for no reason, right? And if there is a valid reason to go to an office and see your team, and that's fun for you and you enjoy it, or there's a lot of productivity that comes from that, great. But do you have to do that every day? Do you have to take a full day of PTO off to go see a doctor? There's little things like that make a big difference in how a company treats their employees.
And this is actually a very fascinating space, because I've mentioned business travel earlier. I know we have, and by the way, we would love to hear what's your background. Like, everybody's listening to us right now. Drop us a note. Tell us what's your sector that you're working in. Are you rather in finance? Are you more in travel? would be super interesting for us to guide the conversation as well. And my point is, so I've mentioned business travel, but what you just said, Jordan, was also influence the way that you manage meetings within organizations, like internal meetings. In a remote work, it's going to change a lot as well. Like all those on-site meetings, because maybe this will even become a business trip, because people have started to move outside of big cities to have a better, just a better lifestyle. And some people have actually starting to travel. And
cities are paying people. Cities are paying people to move there. Now you have a lot of rural areas that are like, come live here. We will pay. There's a company that was paying people to move out of San Francisco. So like, yeah, like, and I get it. I grew up about 50 minutes south of San Francisco, and I'd go there every weekend. And it changed a lot throughout the years that I lived. I grew up there. So I could see why, a lot of this is happening, and it's going to be great because people are going to be able to prioritize what's the lifestyle I want. Do I want to go live in this major city where I'm bumper to bumper traffic and things smell on the bus every day? People like that.
Yeah, definitely. And Hannah, what's super interesting is with e-residency, you were trailblazers typically, like before, because this happened before all this big awareness. Can you explain to us what's the rationale behind this initiative? What is e-residency, and what's the ambition of Estonia with that?
Yeah, sure. It has a really interesting history, which I won't go too much in detail because I could talk about it all day. But basically, Estonia is a post-Soviet country. The Soviet occupation ended in the 90s, and when the USSR left, they left nothing here. It was absolutely barren, and the government had to very quickly decide, what do we do? How do we actually make this country work? We have a small population of actually quite technologically minded people, because this was where the Soviet Union had their cybersecurity base and their internet base and everything. But apart from that, not much. So a very smart young government decided, and also I think the timing worked, that it was going to go digital. That was the decision they made, and I think it was a great decision that they did it at the time. So they started developing a hugely advanced infrastructure, which they've continued to build over 30 years. And now we're at a point in this country where, we're highly digitized. 99% of public services are online. The only thing that you actually have to physically turn up to do is get married. And that's probably important, I think, that you do that. Every Estonian has a digital identity card, and that gives them access to all this public infrastructure, and also many private, increasingly more and more private services as well, like banking, etc.
Nice.
And about 7 years ago, in 2014, they kind of were at a point where they were like, well, this is great for us, but we're so far ahead of everyone else. What do we do now? How do we get economic growth? We're still relying a little bit on the EU and NATO and our European neighbors. So how do we make our country succeed even more? We've only got a population of 1.3 million people. What do we do? So they decided, they had this sort of crazy idea at the time, which is, why don't we give access to what we have to foreigners? And we'll see how that goes. And in the end, the motivation was that maybe foreigners can have this card, the e-residency digital identity card, which means that they can start a company here and do business online from anywhere in the world. So basically, it was giving another opportunity for entrepreneurs to start a company. Maybe in their own country, it's really expensive. It's difficult. There's a lot of bureaucracy, but here they can run it pretty easily online and take advantage of services and these kinds of things here. So fast forward to now, we have over 80,000 e-residents from around the world. They've started over 17,000 companies, and the vast majority are location independent. So many of them are digital nomads. Many of them maybe live in their own country, but they can take their business with them anywhere. They might travel a lot for business, or they might, have different houses around the world so they can live in different places. And so, yeah, as I said, we were giving an opportunity for entrepreneurs. And then I thought I'd also mention the digital nomad visa, since it's been mentioned a few times. This actually came out of discussions with e-residents. So as I said, many of them are digital nomads. They sort of suggested to us a few years ago, have you thought about making a visa for us, basically? And our team back then, I wasn't here back then, but they basically started the process of lobbying the government. They did some research. They got a whole bunch of focus groups together where they invited government, private sector, and also international experts in this field in. And, you know, that culminated basically in like the law change, the new visa, and the launch by August last year, 2020. And it's the first in the European Union. I have seen like quotes that it's the first in the world, but I'm not so sure about that. I think there have been some maybe in the past, but definitely the first called the digital nomad visa. And there has been a huge interest. We actually were speaking to the Estonian Tourism Board today about it, and we were looking at the figures. We've had 100,000 visitors to our landing page and 50,000 people reading our blogs. We've had a few hundred applications, and we've actually handed out physically 80 visas. And the biggest countries so far have been the US, Russia, Australia, and Canada. And so these two programs, I think, where did they come from? I think they came a little bit from the fact that Estonia is itself a startup nation because of this sort of tech approach they take. It's very entrepreneurial. Every Estonian you ever meet,
it's in the DNA.
Yes, they have a side hustle. They have a company. They, you know,
nice.
Here they sell chocolate. They have events companies. It's insane. I'm like, I think I should start a company just so I can be part of it.
Let us know.
Yeah, I will. And also very citizen focused, very customer, aka the citizen, also the e-resident focused. So yeah, I think for all these reasons, it's been amazing to see. It's also, I think we were also a bit of the head of the game in a sense. And maybe because we are a small country, it was a bit easier to implement these kinds of things. And we've seen like economic benefits in Estonia. We've seen taxes. We've seen more people coming here because they know about the country because of e-residency and the visa. And we've also seen a lot of social and cultural benefits. So people are more aware of the country. People are more aware of the, you know, the nature, the people, the language, all these things. So it's been incredible for the nation, but I think also, you know, has given great opportunities to many people around the world.
That's really nice. No, but we'll definitely get back at this because it's I have some questions that link directly to that. Sure. I would just like to take Imelda's question here, and before we read that out, take a moment, everybody in the audience, to scroll the comments and feel free to connect, you know, with anyone that's working, you know, in the industry that appeals to you, or that's where you think you have some similar skills. This is a place to network and exchange, so feel free to. Who wants to take that question? What do we define as a digital nomad? What's the definition of that?
I'll give it a shot. I'll give it a shot. But it's a bit like the remote working jargon. It's a bit like the different terms. It can mean different things to different people. In relation to Estonia's digital nomad visa, it will have specific criteria, just like some of the other ones around the world that you can find in the Caribbean, etc. But a digital nomad essentially is someone who is accessing a visa to go and either work in a place for an extended period of time or is moving around. However, when I first started nomading back in 2007 down in Southeast Asia, it was the case of moving around a lot. So to Imelda, I want to say that just like everything in this world of future of work that's been accelerated, you now have families that move. You now have slow mads, like Hannah said, who maybe do 6 months at a time. You might have people who just stay in one part of Europe, for example, and move around, because Europe can be very friendly so you're moving countries, you're moving locations, but you're still nomading. So normally it's someone who works, hence the word digital, and moves around as they work. And the visa part, again, Imelda, depends on the offering from the country and the sort of stipulations there and the fine print. But Imelda, hopefully that helps to define that for you.
Yeah, so yeah, digital nomad it's more of a lifestyle. Basically, it's not a job, and it's because there could be some confusion. It's really the fact to be location independent to steal the words from your mouth, Rowena. And Jordan, what's really interesting with you is that you have a perfect vantage point because you help with recruitment, but you're also the remote job coach. In terms of profiles of companies working remotely, because I mean we've all seen the announcements, right? I would say, like on the top of my head, 75% are a bit more new age companies, a little bit younger, and some more mainstream companies start to actually catch up. What's the trend that you are seeing in your position?
Yeah, I'd like to go real quick back to the digital nomad comment.
Yeah,
and
sure.
The only thing I'd like to add, because I completely agree with Rowena, is that we needed a word for this, right? So just it doesn't have to be too complicated, but I think when you're having all these countries have to classify this type of person that they're seeing come in their country and go, there's going to be different types of digital nomads, but I see it more as just the umbrella term for someone who's working on their, virtually while traveling. And we just needed a term to put to this. So, so that, and I'm glad that it's being formalized. Like there's actually, because from a legal perspective, digital nomads have always operated in this weird gray area where it's like, you are working. So for instance, when I go to a country, I'm like, are you working? Are you a student? Are you here on vacation? And for the longest time, you have to be like, I'm a tourist. And you have to, sit there with a straight face. I'm a tourist. And I'm taking vacation for 6 months. They're like, you're not working for 6 months? I'm like, no. And it was always just kind of weird. So I'm just glad that they're formalizing, because I think it gives people more opportunities to, just have a name to call this thing. So your question around companies, I like to make the distinction between remote on accident versus remote on purpose, right? It's there's all these companies that it's like remote was not there, like they were an office culture, and they had to go remote. And now those folks are having these big choices where they're like, do we come back as a more hybrid company? Do we really take a look at these policies? Do we really start to let go a little bit more? And that's a painful process for a lot of companies, right? Especially these bigger ones, these behemoths who've been doing things a certain way for so long. And that's why it's so important to have people who are in change management, who are helping remote. Like Rowena, I think it's part of what you do is kind of help these companies figure this stuff out. So that's so important, because without the right, not only policies, but the ways that they're creating the culture to be hybrid, I mean, you're going to be in trouble, right? Because you have people that have these natural biases, and you have all these people that are struggling, that are in the office versus remote. And so I think what we're going to see is in the next 10 years or so, these really large companies or even mid-sized companies that started off in the office, if they don't choose to find some sort of flexibility in the middle, they're going to be out of business. I mean, that's my prediction. I don't know if it's a prediction that is too bold, but if you're not moving towards flexible work as a company right now, even as just hybrid and trying to figure that out, you will not be able to attract the younger generations that are coming up knowing technology, knowing remote work, and you will not be able to keep your best performers, because they're going to be looking for companies that will be able to do that. So I'm also seeing on the remote job seeker side, there's this kind of paradox where there's a lot more remote jobs available, but they're not finding that they're always truthful. Like there's always these jobs that are like, oh, well, we're going to come back to the office. So that's really frustrating for a lot of job seekers. And then a lot of these job seekers are having trouble with competing, in these job pools, because they're not able to really articulate their skills. They're not able to stand out from the noise, because there's hundreds and hundreds of applications going into a lot of these jobs.
Super interesting. And I've seen we have a comment about the tax compliance. We'll get to that in a bit. I just would like to build on what you just said, Jordan, about companies who might not have a choice if they want to keep attracting talent. And Rowena, I'd like to address that for you from what you have seen, would you say that most companies were ready for that shift and for what we've been experiencing?
No.
The answer is clear.
Jordan's fabulous term, remote by accident, it sums it up, or forced remote. But we need to thank remote work. It's time for a little bit of gratitude here, guys, because actually remote work kept a lot of businesses and economies going. It became business contingency or disaster recovery in a lot of cases. So I think before we look at how it was done, that lifeline did keep a lot of things afloat during COVID, and it is something that gets brushed over. So even if people hadn't the security, the infrastructure, the hardware, the software, the training set up, the remote work essentially kept a lot of companies afloat. So that's something that gets brushed over. And from a business contingency and disaster recovery or business continuity point of view, it's a really important strategic point for anyone listening. So I think we need to acknowledge that. Whether it was done well or not, Aurelie, is a whole other thing, because people were thrown into the deep end, and believe me, some learned to swim. It might have been doggy paddle with just a bit of a head above water, but they figured it out. And you know what's more interesting about that is individuals figured it out. And to Jordan's point, and even to Hannah's point about the startup scene in Estonia, I also think, apart from individuals being empowered by the flexibility of remote work, I think we sparked entrepreneurialism as well, because people have figured out by managing their own workload from home, by being autonomous, etc., that they can work for themselves as well. And there is an angle there too, that whatever about what's going to happen for employers and how they're going to catch up, I think there's an interesting opportunity for freelancers, for solopreneurs, for businesses being started, more startup, more entrepreneurship out of this as well, as a result of this pandemic, because people figured out how to do it. And it has sparked a lot of creativity and entrepreneurship in individuals, Aurelie. That's one of the things I'd love to get across today.
That's brilliant. It's one of the bright side of this crisis, basically, right? And I'd like to direct that to you, Hannah. So we've mentioned, so there are some challenges and there's some competition out there with other countries starting to, Dubai also has a 1-year remote work visa. We've seen this with the Caribbean islands as well. Croatia has made some announcements. But I think it's even bigger than just having that visa. We've seen a comment passing by about bank and some taxation aspects. Can you give us some clarification here on how do you tackle that with e-residency?
Sure. Big questions and systemic conditions that unfortunately are relics of past that have not really caught up with how we live anymore. I think even since, not even with the digitization, even just with air travel and being able to go to different countries and having borders, these types of things. So from our perspective, I think I saw a couple of questions where, sort of along the lines of, how does Estonia retain people? How do you people there? How do you keep the talent? And this is like our biggest KPI in a sense. It's how do we keep these people that have come in, but also how do we attract more, and how do we stay competitive with other countries? And I will start, I really want to point out that we actually like competition. We think it's really healthy, and we think it's also great because different countries will have different customer segments that they go after, different audiences, different types of people that will come and work there. So we're not necessarily scared of, countries who, on the e-residency side, I think Lithuania has announced one, Portugal's announced one, other countries talk about it. We haven't seen anything concrete yet, but we know that they're coming. Sure. And on the digital nomad visa side, they're just every day, there's new ones. Malta, I think, was the most recent, Cape Verde Islands in Africa, which made me kind of want to go there. All of these countries. So yeah, so I just want to say we're not scared of it. I think it's actually really healthy, not just for the countries themselves, but also it's good because for the end users, for the people who actually want to use these programs, there's all this great competition. Everyone's competing for that. So like banking, like tax. These are things that we literally talk about on a daily basis. How can we make this better? On the e-residency side, we work with, which we're always trying to find better banking partners for our e-residents, and working with them so that there's more understanding of e-residency, so that they trust someone who is living in another country who has a business in Estonia. And then on the tax side, we're testing many different tools to help educate e-residents about, the international tax concepts and how they work for them. Because unfortunately, we can't necessarily fix these things because we are a small country and a small program, but we can maybe ease the kind of the way around them. And then on the digital nomad visa side, I mentioned that we were talking to the Estonian Tourism Board, and we're also in discussions with the government ministries about clarifying some of these tax residency issues in particular, and better promoting it to people so that they're aware of this and they understand these issues. So yeah, I'll stop there because I know that next week's webinar will be more on these more complex issues. But yeah, back to you, Aurelie.
No, but it's true that the tax, and it does make a lot of sense, because this is a bit the elephant in the room, right? Because it's nice to talk about the visa, it's perfect, we can travel, we can work from anywhere, but there's always that at the end of the day, it's the complication, right? So again, like next week, there's going to be a dedicated webinar for that, and there was a Pratik's question touched that a little bit. So John, if you wouldn't mind displaying that again, and Rowena, I think you had some answer.
Yeah, I wanted to, because India is such a big country. I wanted actually to comment on a couple of things in there. And as you heard, the webinar next week will cover off in more detail. But Pratik, I want to point out to you that in other countries around the world, smaller regions, I'm in Gran Canaria, we've someone on the call from Tenerife. Even within Spain, there are smaller regions with different autonomy and tax breaks that are attracting within their own countries, within their own regions. And I know of initiatives in Goa to attract digital nomads within India, because India is so big. So it's interesting, you're seeing it as attracting people from outside, whereas there's also internal markets in bigger countries and opportunities. And another good example of that, Pratik, is Madeira at the moment in Portugal, which has got, again, a special setup for digital nomads, special allowances. So not going into the tax specifics, I really encourage anyone who's interested in this, if you want to connect with me, there are worldwide examples of regions, pockets. Ireland, the island of Ireland, is establishing 500 hubs to disperse rurally workers out of urban areas. And again, this is the way for Irish people to be slightly more nomadic, or at least have mobility around their own country. So I really encourage you to look as well at these internal country initiatives, and hopefully Pratik, that's a bit of a help as well in terms of your thinking.
Super. Yeah, indeed, there's so many things going on everywhere in the world. And what's actually very interesting is I've seen in some forums online, typically like currently global nomads, to actually use the new term that we're using in this webinar. They're pushing even the Indonesian government to do something like formal, like a proper visa for Bali, because it's such a huge hub for nomads. So it's also very interesting to see that the pressure and the demand might even drive, governments to do some things. It's a little bit even the reverse that what's happening with e-residency, with the government clearly taking the lead. And a question that is connected to that, Jordan, because the whole idea of this webinar is to move, how do we move from the what to the how? So you've mentioned people sometimes struggle to land a job that is remote. We discussed that a little bit when we prepared the webinar. Some companies actually promote jobs as being remote, but there are still some geographic restrictions, or they're not fully remote. How can we go past that? And how can we actually, even maybe better work together, or who can do what to enable that borderless society that we mentioned.
Yeah, and just commenting quickly on the Bali situation, I actually interviewed Alumde Benro, who was, I have a YouTube video that I released last week that was about digital nomad visas and the status there, and they had a change.org petition that was going. So I think it's interesting to see how the different visas are coming about, whether it is from the government realizing there's this huge opportunity, or there's either from the nomadic side teaming up, like he's teaming up with locals and they're pushing media, which he's a very media savvy guy. So he's using media also to kind of put the pressure on, and then the social proof of having the signatures. And the last time that I had heard, they had gotten the proposal to the desk, but they hadn't gotten confirmation of what those next steps were. So it's something, government moves slow, right? So how can we make governments move quicker and move like Estonia's doing? They're crushing it. So to your other question, FlexJobs has a statistic that about 95% of jobs have some sort of restriction. Usually it's a geographic restriction, a time zone restriction, country restriction. And I don't need to sit here and lecture the people in the comments. It sounds like they're dealing with these very, as a prominent thought on their mind is this. And I'm not going to sit here and say that there's a great answer to this, because the 5% of companies that are fully distributed in doing this or being able to hire people fully remotely, they're the ones, and that's not my quote. That's like a FlexJobs quote. So I don't want to take, I don't want to take the heat for that one, John. But
John is on fire.
Yeah, he's got the quick fingers, man. Oops.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. It's the first webinar. Come on, we're gonna have some of these. So it's now John's great. I am very impressed with his skills on StreamYard. So their stat is 95% of the jobs have some sort of restriction, but from the job seeker side, the work from anywhere, the 5% of jobs, that is the most desired. Like that's the most, it's the least amount is the most desired. So there's clearly a supply and demand issue here. And I think I'm glad that they're covering a lot of this tax stuff next week, because it's not something I would ever dare to jump in the deep water with. But I think, as we've seen in some of the comments, there's usually different ways where companies would maybe contract with a third-party company like GeoShield, for instance, who was speaking at the Running Remote conference a few years ago when I was there. And they were talking about having, headquarters in these different countries for companies to be able to hire people and be able to go through there. There's obviously hiring freelancers is something to do. I think, out of anybody on this panel, Rowena is probably more qualified to answer this than myself.
And I just wanted to add to what Jordan said. And with the 95%, I want to also shine a bit of hope, because that's the official line. Okay, in terms of there is the fully distributed companies over here, and they're a small amount. But in the wider world, what's really interesting to me, and a lot of individuals come to me, there's a lot of unofficial remote going on. So let me explain. Yeah, there's a lot of unofficial remote going on. And I actually have a set of resources if you want to contact me on LinkedIn, which helps you put together as an individual your business case. Even for some of the most traditional, including legal accountancy, I've seen and I came across with someone recently traveling who didn't think for years she would ever get the chance to go remote, but put together a business case with her employer, and she is unofficial remote. She goes back to the UK, for example, but it's happening more and more. So what I want to also encourage as well, because that's the grassroots driving it, and the one or two exceptions then can become that a team might be, etc., because sometimes with changing an employer's point of view, it takes those one or two people who push, are successful, show that they're trustworthy, and it drives the change in the organization. So if you need anything on the business case with really good figures, hit me up on LinkedIn. I have some really good articles, and I have a calculator on the telework savings as well, both from the employer's perspective and the environmental perspective. So if any employers we're dealing with care about the environment, remote work has a massive, strong argument there as well.
Super interesting. I want to have those resources. But Jordan, you've mentioned, so we have a little bit, about 10 minutes left. So feel free to drop your questions for Hannah, for Rowena, for Jordan in the comments. And so we have some time to tackle them. What I wanted to ask you, Jordan, so you've mentioned you have a YouTube channel and you tackle lots of topics. Right now, on the top of your head, what are the top 3 hot topics right now in what you're tackling and the demand from your community?
Yeah. So for my own one, I think, I mean, one of the big ones is, how can I find a job that lets me travel?
Okay.
And because I think people are just excited. They're like, oh, wow, borders are opening back up. Like, I can actually travel. Whereas maybe, like Rowena had said earlier, people have spent the majority of a pandemic in between 4 walls, you know, and if you've been someone who's enjoyed travel and then all of a sudden it came to just staying in one place, that was probably very difficult. I just more of a personal perspective, like I hope to I'm going to be a director one day of some pretty large projects. And one of my things I love to do is just show kind of the reality of living in a different country and what that's like. So being someone who's living in Mexico and learning the language here and being part of the culture for a few years now, it's just my love for this culture and it's just something I like to share and like to give people inspiration for, hey, you know, if you want to go live somewhere else and appreciate that culture, you know, you can do it. And I want to give like a real perspective of that. So that's something I'm personally interested in. And then people just have a bunch of different requests of more tactical, you know, things of how to find a remote job. So try to mix it between entertaining and also instructional. And I think it's kind of what makes good content. But who knows? Go watch a video and let me know.
Hey, there we go. We can drop the link to your YouTube channel as well in the comments, so everybody in the audience can take a look. But what you say is actually very interesting, because this is exactly how I landed in Dubai. I was in Dubai. I was supposed to come here for, like, you know, just to visit some friends and go away from some restrictions. France announced the second lockdown when I was here. Like, I've been here for 4 or 5 days, and I decided to extend, and I didn't come back. So I'm in Dubai since last November, and I'm in the process of here, you know, acquiring residency, opening my business here. So it's pretty representative of probably what a lot of people have, you know, started to experience. So one thing as well, Hannah, to link this as well with the wonderful initiatives, what do you think would even be the next step for e-residency? Because you have many things already lined up.
Yeah, so I think in the briefing note you sent me, I think you asked something like, what keeps you up at night? And maybe I'll answer that now.
Yeah, go for it.
Because basically, what keeps me up at night is inclusion. And I think the conversation we're having is very much around people living in middle and high income countries who have the opportunity to travel and work. And this also kind of translates to the markets that we reach. As I said many times, Estonia is a small country. We don't have too many embassies. And so for people to be able to apply for a digital nomad visa, they need to go to an embassy. And if they also want to get an e-residency card, they need to pick it up either at an embassy or at another pickup location that we have. And we have huge gaps in the world, like, just being completely transparent. We have huge gaps. I think up until recently, we only had like 2 pickup locations in Asia, the whole of Asia. And we've just opened 2 more, so that's a bit better. We didn't have any in sub-Saharan Africa, and we just opened 1 in South Africa, and I think 1 will be hopefully opening in other places in the next year. So that for me is something that we need to work harder on, and also so in the sense of being able to open up the opportunity more for people to start businesses or travel here and live here and experience Estonia and Europe as well. And then the other side is for those people that we already have, make sure that, you know, we are giving them all the things they need to be able to do their taxes in the right countries and, like, legally to be able to get a bank account and make sure that, you know, they can pay and get paid. And just sort of taking a line from the Estonian government and making sure that we take a e-resident and digital nomad centered focus. So I think that's kind of what's next for us, at least in the next few years, definitely.
Super interesting. I also love your point, Rowena, on the fact that it has clearly accelerated, people starting their own thing, solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, all moving away more a little bit from the corporate life. I've just seen indeed a comment about the fact that it's, on the one hand, happy employees, but on the other hand, corporations have to balance this with risks and taxes. And again, this is going to be tackled next week. The webinar, we will have specialists, and tune in because you'll have the answers to all of your questions. Rowena,
I want to add, because it's interesting to read that back. It's not only about having happy Nomad employees. I have to challenge that a little bit and say, I think that, it's one thing to show someone how to remote work. If you're an employer that is going to support people to work from anywhere, you have to do more than just send them off and worry about the tax. Tax is important, don't get me wrong. But also if they're changing, just with business travel, Aurelie, you would support business travel. If someone was being seconded, if you were being seconded in a role, which I was when I was in telecommunications, I spent 3 months in Thailand many years ago. I had a local buddy there. I had local support. I had a translator. I'm not saying all those things, but I think we need to be careful that it's not just a case of creating this work from anywhere and not building the skills. There's still skills needed to support any worker that's going to go on this journey. And as Hannah said, what keeps me awake at night actually is similar. It's that inclusion, because we're very privileged to be able to have this conversation. Sure. But also we need to be aware that not everyone can have the access to what we're talking about. But also, I really, really want to, and I'm an educator, so I have to say, we need to support the skilling, we need to support the upskilling of people and sending them, and I know John would agree this, to a different culture. Supporting that's fine, but offer what you can as well to support them. If there's cultural information you can supply, if there's other skills and training you can supply, because it's a lifestyle, as we keep saying, and in terms of it being a lifestyle, we have to support such.
Love that. Jordan, what keeps you awake at night?
Well, sounds like you couldn't have picked 3 more aligned panelists. For me at least, I think about how privileged I am. I'm from the United States, so being able to travel as easily as I've been able to travel and get residency here in Mexico, and those things are something that I have to work hard not to take for granted, because on the surface it's easy to just kind of discard that. But I've been on, similar to Hannah, I've been on a lot of these webinars, and one of the things that always comes up in the comments when I'm talking about people looking for work, finding remote work, is folks that are in countries that were born there without having to choose their passport, and that has prevented them from certain opportunities. One of the things that I work with Nomad Skillshare. So Rowena, I'm sure this is right up your alley. Is next week I'm doing a couple of sessions with some folks in Indonesia. There's a program that Tarek Kalusi is building out, who I'm sure a lot of people would know. And just trying to, volunteer my time to causes like that, where I can help people learn those skills. And maybe I can't move the world as far as legislation and tax and make passports and border lists and all these things, but I can focus my energy on taking time every single month to help teach people skills that are a bit easier for me at this point. And I just do second nature, right? In addition to that, I see a lot of the refugee crises that are happening, and I see that a solution to people who are in places of displacement, fleeing countries, things like that, remote work is a huge opportunity for those folks as well, because it allows them to democratize their skills and find some way to support their family. Lorraine Charles with the Mall is a person who's heading that up. And one of my goals is to be in a position to not only donate skills, but donate profits to these types of organizations, or be able to spread awareness of how help, especially those of us who have the privilege of being on these kind of calls and looking back at our careers and saying, look how much help I've received. So that's something it does keep me up at night. Other than the crazy rain and thunderstorms and hurricanes sometimes we have in the Caribbean, but yeah, I'm really excited for the future of all this, and I really appreciate being part of this conversation.
That's super. I think you named it. I think it's probably our mission to make this accessible for as many people as possible, who no matter where they are in the world. And I couldn't have thought of better closing words. So thank you so much to the three of you, Jordan, Hannah, Rowena, for joining us. John, with your very fast typing capabilities. It's been a huge pleasure to host this webinar. Super excited to kick off. It was the first one of a series of amazing content. Now, John, our magician in the back scene, is going to launch the video to tease the topic for next week. And bye to everyone from all of us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Aurelie.